Here's one thing that the Cardinals must avoid this season if they want a legitimate chance to make the college football playoffs.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? Welcome in to this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. We're less than 2 weeks away from the start of the Louisville football season, and there are high expectations for year 4 of the Brom era. One thing that the Cardinals must avoid this season if they want a legitimate chance to make the college football playoffs is the trap game. Jeff Brom's team must eliminate the trap game loss in 2026. We'll explain what a trap game actually is. We'll identify the top matchups that meet that specific criteria. But I want to begin this episode by explaining how eliminating the trap game loss will give the Cardinals an opportunity to take that next step as a program. And that's been a conversation all throughout the offseason. How do the Cardinals take the football program to the next level? Well, what is the next level? I think it's pretty obvious. It's getting to the college football playoff. You have not been able to make a CFP appearance yet. That is the next step. Some will say it's consistently getting to and winning the ACC championship, but if you win the ACC championship, then you automatically get a spot in the college football playoff. So I just combine the two. So how do you get to the next level? I think it starts with eliminating something that has been holding you back over the past couple of seasons. That's the trap game loss. Like when you talk about getting to the college football playoff, that is something that has been consistently holding this program back. Now, I want to make something clear because I don't want it to seem like I'm not grateful or appreciative for Jeff Brom, because what he's done at Louisville has been pretty solid. I think his past 3 seasons have been successful here in the Ville. It's pretty clear that he has elevated this program since he took over in December of 2022. When you look at the 2000s, like the 21st century, the Cardinals are a perennial 6 to 8 win program. Like you have seasons where they don't get to that level, or there are some seasons where they exceed expectations and can get to 9 to 10 win seasons, maybe even more. But for the most part, over the past couple of decades, Louisville has hovered around the 6 to 8 win total every season, for the most part. Jeff Brom, in his 3 seasons in the Ville, has won at least 9 games. 2023, he won 10, 24-9, 25-9. So he has raised the floor for this program and has elevated the program since he took over just a couple years ago. I think that that's worth mentioning. The first 3 seasons of the Brom era have been successful. They've had some pretty high highs. Beating the top teams, Louisville has been able to record the signature victories. That really hasn't been the problem. 2023, Notre Dame. 24 Clemson, 25 Miami. The issue has been that the Cardinals have followed up those huge victories with losses against teams that they have no business losing against. So you're talking about year 4 where there are high expectations, competing for the ACC, making your first college football playoff appearance with a schedule that's pretty favorable. You have tough games against Ole Miss and SMU right out of the gate, but from a conference perspective, you don't play Miami or Clemson or Virginia Tech. You're projected to finish top 3 in the conference by most media outlets out there, including the ACC media. So how do you go from 9 wins every season to making the college football playoff? Well, this isn't the only way, but it starts with eliminating the trap game loss. Like, of course, you're playing the hypothetical here, but think about how different each of the past 3 seasons would have ended had you just eliminated the trap game loss. Like 2023, you get that signature victory against Notre Dame to move to 6-0 on the season. And the week after that, you follow it up with a loss at Pittsburgh, a game where you were heavily favored. Pittsburgh finished 3-9 Now, everything that could have gone wrong in that game went wrong. It was rainy. It was wet. You had an offensive lineman go down with a serious injury in warmups, and from all accounts, that messed up the morale. Jawar Jordan got hurt. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong, but you still had no business losing that game. You missed opportunities in the first half to put that game away, and if you win that game, you're 7-0. Very real scenario that you go 11-0 into that Governor's Cup game against Kentucky. And how much does that change things? A very valid question. You could be fighting for a chance to be in the 14 college football playoff. Now, the butterfly effect, some believe is real. So you change the outcome of the Pittsburgh game. What does that do for the rest of the schedule? I don't know. But just looking at this from the surface level, you change that outcome, changes everything. 2024, you beat Clemson on the road. First time you beat the Tigers since you joined the ACC. What happened? Right after the bye, you go to the West Coast. You play Stanford, a team that you had, I believe, a double-digit lead against in the first half, and you just sort of went on cruise control. And then all of a sudden, the game is close. In the fourth quarter, Stanford hits the game-winning field goal, and you lose. The Cardinal finished 3-9 in 2024. And if you need sort of a refresher and a reminder on what was happening at that point across the college landscape, the teams that you needed to lose all lost. I know you're on the outside looking in, but what happens if you beat Stanford? What happens if you beat Stanford and then you beat Pittsburgh and Kentucky? You look at that season totally differently. Like the ceiling completely changes. 2025, it's like, maybe it's a little bit different because the Miami win was a couple games before the California loss, but you didn't play the greatest against Boston College or Virginia Tech. You went into the game against the Golden Bears as a 20-point favorite. You had multiple opportunities to seize the momentum and go ahead in that game late in the second half. You couldn't do it. Then you lose in overtime. That's sort of the thing, is that the common denominator with these trap game losses are two things. The inability to capture momentum late in games to be able to put the game away, and the self-inflicted mistakes like the Pittsburgh game, Stanford game, Cal game. Different reasons why you lost those games, but two things are for certain. You hurt yourself. You created, you created those self-inflicting mistakes, and also you were unable to seize momentum at the end of games. So overall, think about it. If you eliminate the trap game in 2023, you're in a very advantageous spot to compete for a playoff spot. Maybe the same in 2024. And now I look at 2026, where you've got a favorable schedule. You are facing your top tests right away in September. Ole Miss week 1, SMU week 2. Regardless of what happens in those games, the margin for error is pretty slim. Like, you don't have a luxury of losing games you're not supposed to lose because of how the ACC is viewed across the country. Because if you lose a game you're not supposed to lose, you're going to be penalized more for that than an SEC team or a Big Ten team would. So if you lose a game you're not supposed to lose, unless you're 11-1 going into conference championship weekend, you're probably not going to get an at-large bid. So you got to get to Charlotte and win the ACC championship game. Well, losing more than one game in conference play, there's no guarantee that you're going to get to Charlotte with how good Miami is, with how good SMU is. You've got some other teams like Clemson, Virginia Tech, maybe Pittsburgh, maybe Georgia Tech. List goes on. Maybe NC State, who knows? But anyway, we're going to talk about the three candidates that fit the criteria of a trap game. So what is a trap game other than it being a game that you're not supposed to lose? Well, I look at two things. Number one, it's not one of the toughest games on paper on your schedule. Like, the second toughest game of the season is not a trap game. And the second thing is, it's a game where you're either A, heavily favored to win, and or B, a game that you're kind of automatically assuming that you're going into thinking you're going to win. it's a game where you look at your schedule and you really don't think that's a loss. Maybe you're a little bit concerned, but chances are you're expecting your team to win that game. So there's one clear trap game, in my opinion. And this is a team that's being slept on by the rest of the conference, but looking at what they've done with a healthy quarterback, this team can be dangerous. I'll tell you what 2 of the 3 trap games are when we come back. Don't go anywhere. You're tuned into Locked On Louisville, covering your team every day. Before season even kicks off, everyone's making predictions. Who wins the division? Who makes the playoffs? Who's lifting the trophy at season's end? On KALSHI, America's #1 prediction market platform, you can trade those predictions in a live market. For example, can Tennessee win at least 7 games this season? The Titans are currently trading at 46%, meaning that a $100 trade pays out $200.98 if Cam Ward and the Titans can reach 7 wins in 2026. Well, on KALSHI, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house. And as the probability changes, you can buy in and buy out of your position. You can trade the draft pick, the game, and more on KALSHI. Download the KALSHI app, use code LOCKEDON to get $10 when you trade $10. KALSHI. KALSHI, trade on anything. 18 plus only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. KALSHI products are not available in all jurisdictions. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. Thank you so much for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Leave us a comment in the YouTube section below. Both are great ways to help the show continue to grow. So continuing the conversation, if a trap game is a game that you have no business losing, it's not one of the toughest games on your schedule, and it's one where you're probably either A, heavily favored, or B, assuming that you're going to win, which game fits the criteria? Well, there's one that pops out immediately, and it's because I think that the rest of the conference is sleeping on this one team. The top trap game for me on the schedule is Saturday, October 17th at Syracuse. It's the game right after the primetime matchup on Friday night against Florida State, and with how the trap games have been correlating with bye weeks for Louisville, well, that kind of fits the trend because the week after the Syracuse matchup, Louisville has a bye on October 24th. It starts with this, though. It feels like historically Louisville never plays great at the Carrier Dome, or the JMA Wireless Dome as it's known now. So I know that there have been some games where Louisville has walked in to that stadium and thinking, yeah, we're going to win this game, and you just don't. Like, I look back to the 2012 Sugar Bowl season. That Syracuse game was one where you thought Louisville was going to win, and they didn't. 2022 was another season that I thought Louisville was going to win, and they got blown out. So Louisville's walking into a stadium where they historically just haven't played the greatest. Syracuse, according to the ACC media, is projected to finish 14th out of the 17 teams. Now, in my schedule rankings from yesterday, where I ranked the toughest games for the Cardinals, this game was ranked at number 8 as the toughest match, or the 8th toughest matchup. And I mentioned that I think Syracuse is not the 14th best team in the conference. I think they are better. Now, they finished 3-9 a season ago. But when you look at the context, look at 2024. Fran Brown gets hired. They win 10 games. They beat Miami. They have a great season. 2025 looked like it was going to be another season of sustained success. They started out 3-1, lost to Tennessee in the season opener, but they beat UConn. They beat Clemson. All signs were pointing up. And then starting quarterback, Notre Dame transfer Steve Angeli sustained a season-ending injury. Well, the Orange would go on to lose all 8 of the remaining games and finish 3-9. Why is that important? Well, Steve Angeli is back, and he's apparently 100% healthy and ready to go. So if he's healthy and ready to go, and the team that they've surrounded him with is pretty comparable to last year, like I think the offensive line is going to be more serviceable than it was in 2025. There's talent on the defense. Some question marks at running back, receiver, and tight end, but there's potential and promise at the skill position. So you have your QB1 back, who was pretty successful when he played in the first 4 games of the season, and you've surrounded him with just as much, if not more talent. I don't know about you all, but signs are pointing to Syracuse being a better team. The thing about it is I don't think Syracuse is going to be good enough to the point to where they're looked at as one of the most challenging games on the schedule. That's the thing for me, and that's why I think that this is going to remain a trap game, because it's probably a matchup you're going to walk into thinking, well, Louisville's probably going to be projected or favored to win this. They've got matchups against Cal, at Pitt, at Virginia before they play the Cardinals. Who knows? They might be undefeated. And if they are, then this isn't going to be a trap game. Of course, this list could change depending on what happens in the season. But with Syracuse, you're going into a part of the season where historically the trap game has come between mid-October and mid-November. So that fits the part of the schedule. The bye week is involved, so that kind of checks out with the trend. You're going to a place where you don't historically play well, and I think that Fran Brown and the Syracuse Orange are better than 14 out of 17 in the conference. So Syracuse is my number one trap game on the season. The second one was another obvious choice for me. I went with the late September matchup against Wake Forest on Saturday, September 26th. It is the final of the 3-game home stretch before the Cardinals will play their first road game at NC State in early October. Wake Forest, this is kind of from a schedule placement. Like you're coming off of that SMU game where emotions are going to be high. There's so much riding on that specific outcome. I could see a situation where Louisville beats SMU and they're just due for an emotional letdown the next week. And that would be the game against Wake Forest at home. So a game where you're probably going to be projected to win, but who knows? Maybe it's one where you're like all of a sudden like, hey, maybe things get challenging. And I know that some will think, Dalton, Louisville's not going to lose to Wake Forest. Why is this a trap game? Again, that's what a trap game is. It's kind of one of those matchups where you're almost supposed to write it off immediately, right? Like it's not a game where you're like, I don't know if Louisville's going to win this. It's a game where you're going in saying, yeah, we just got to handle business. We're going to coast in this matchup. We're not going to lose. We're a heavy favorite. It's going to be smooth sailing on a particular game day. That's a trap game. It's one that you're really thinking you're not going to lose. And then all of a sudden you look up at the scoreboard in the fourth quarter and you're like, oh boy. And Wake Forest, I feel like, might be one of the candidates to fit that criteria. It starts with where they're at on the schedule, because here's the thing, it's situational. If you lose to SMU, there's going to be urgency heading into the next game. So I don't think Wake Forest would be a trap game at that point. But if you beat SMU, then you're at a point where maybe the emotional high, you come down off of that and you go into that game before your first road game and maybe you overlook Wake Forest. And I'm hoping that's not the case, but that's just one of the candidates on the schedule. And I think Wake Forest, they're projected to finish 13th in the conference. They're another team that I don't think they're going to fit that expectation. I think they're going to exceed and outperform how the rest of the conference is thinking they will. In my schedule rankings, this was the 9th toughest matchup. They hired a new head coach. Wake Forest goes 8-4 in the regular season, 9-4 overall. They beat Mississippi State in the bowl game. I do need to clarify something that I said and correct myself. Yesterday on the schedule preview, I mentioned that Wake Forest has to show me that they can beat good teams. Well, my mistake. They did beat some of the top teams on their schedule last year. They need to prove that they can score against the top teams on their schedule. Like they beat SMU and Virginia, but they only scored 13 against SMU and they scored 16 against Virginia. Like they have to prove that they could beat the best teams on their schedule. They almost beat Georgia Tech. They lost by 1 in overtime, but overall Wake Forest was pretty solid. Can they score against the best teams on their schedule? Gio Lopez is QB1. The UNC transfer will be the starting quarterback for the Demon Deacons. They've got solid running backs play. Skill position sort of up in the air, but they've replaced a lot of the production that they lost from a season ago via the transfer portal. TBD on how good that portal class is going to be. I would probably predict that the defensive front's going to be solid. Langston Hardy, one of the best pass rushers in the ACC, is back for 2026. Wake Forest is going to be able to get into the opposing backfield. So I think that Louisville's going to be favored to beat the Demon Deacons. The issue is, are they going to be able to handle business and not create those self-inflicting mistakes and also seize the momentum and not allow momentum to shift, not because of anything else the other team was doing, but just because of your own self-mistakes? Well, Wake Forest plays at Purdue on September 12th. They will play at home against Miami on September 18th, which is a Friday. There will be an extra day of rest built in before they go to Louisville. I don't think that they're going to be undefeated coming into this matchup against the Cardinals in late September. That's why I think that this matchup is ultimately going to be a potential trap game. Well, the third game on the list kind of went back and forth. I'm on the fence about whether it's a trap game or not, but I'm also going to explain which games do not meet the criteria of a trap game. Don't go anywhere. You're tuned into Locked On Louisville, covering your team every day. Running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales, and somehow none of them talk to each other. That's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works in one place. Odoo is one platform that allows you to manage, grow, and scale your business. The best organizations know that success isn't just about talent. It's about having everyone work towards the same goal. And that's true in sports just like it is in business. Like we're talking about Louisville eliminating the trap game loss. When the team is working together, everyone's on the same page. You eliminate those self-inflicting mistakes. You allow yourself the opportunity to seize the momentum and, more importantly, not give up the momentum. So when you take care of those two things, you eliminate the trap game losses. Because Jeff Brom understands great organizations win because operations matter. That's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at odoo.com/locked on. That's ODOO.com/locked on. So I mentioned right before the break, we're going to explain which games didn't meet the criteria. As a point of reference, don't forget, trap games are not some of the toughest games on the schedule. So when you look at which games don't qualify and which games don't meet the criteria, well, the top four toughest games on the schedule, in my opinion, Ole Miss, SMU, at NC State, and at Georgia Tech. And, of course, your top road games I don't think are trap games either. So those four games are off the table, right? So that leaves 8. Well, then you also talk about name recognition. Florida State comes to town, and I just have a tough time believing that Louisville's going to overlook the Seminoles just because of the name brand recognition that FSU carries. So because of that, FSU is out of consideration. That's 5. Then you've got at UK. At UK, that's a rivalry game. It's a game that everyone looks forward to. I can't imagine that Louisville doesn't at least care about this game. And for that reason, with it being a rivalry game, that's also not into consideration. I'm also going to take Villanova out of the consideration here because they're an FCS team. And no disrespect to the Wildcats, but this is a game that Louisville should win very easily. That is 7 teams of the 12 that Louisville will play that aren't eligible to be a trap game due to my formula and rubric. Well, you also consider the 2 teams that we just talked about, and that's 9. So there are 3 matchups left. You have at North Carolina versus Stanford and versus Pittsburgh. Stanford, like, I go back and forth on. I say, well, there's no reason that the Cardinals should lose to Stanford, but hey, isn't that the whole point of a trap game? You don't think you're going to lose, and then bam, the fourth quarter, you look up at the scoreboard and things are uncomfortable. Maybe the same is with North Carolina, but North Carolina's schedule is tough to the point to where they might have a new head coach by November 14th. So my third trap game is Saturday, November 21st against Pittsburgh. It's the senior day matchup. It's the last home game, but I'm on the fence because you can say, well, Dalton, that's your 5th most challenging game of the schedule. That's what I'm on the fence. Like, it's challenging, but let's also go back to the conversation we had yesterday where we highlighted just how inconsistent Pittsburgh is every year. When they're on, they can beat anyone in the ACC, but when they're not, they look like one of the bottom 5 teams in the conference. And then you look at when Louisville's playing them, late November. Well, the past 3 seasons, Pittsburgh lost 5 of 6 in 2023 to end the season. At the end of 2024, they lost their last 6 games. 2025, they lost 3 of their last 4. So will they be able to reverse the trend this season? I don't know, but I could see a situation, a scenario where that happens. Pittsburgh, who doesn't have the toughest schedule, they have a respectable schedule with at Virginia Tech, at Miami, versus Georgia Tech, versus Florida State. Maybe they just don't live up to expectations, and they come to Louisville, the final home game of the season for the Cardinals, and Louisville has a really good team, and they're looking ahead to maybe not only the Kentucky game, but the ACC championship game, and maybe they overlook Pittsburgh. Maybe Pittsburgh has 5 to 6 losses at this point, and you're just at a point to where they're just trying to end the season on a positive note, and it's a game where you might be favored by 7, 10, maybe 14 points. That would be a potential trap game for me. Or the reason why I'm on the fence as well is maybe Pittsburgh does put it together this year. Maybe they do put it together, and they're at 2 losses. Or maybe they're in the top 25 when they come to the Ville on November 21st. And if that's the case, that's not a trap game. That's just a tough game overall. But the reason why I think that this could be a trap game as well, if Pittsburgh doesn't live up to expectations and they struggle in 2026 and they come to the Ville and they're just not playing well, it seems like historically outside of 2024, the games between the Cardinals and the Panthers have been close, uncomfortably close. Like 2022, it was close. 2023, Louisville lost. 2025, Pittsburgh had 2 double-digit leads, and Louisville ended up winning that game late. The way that Pat Narduzzi's team plays defense, they bring the pressure. They get after the quarterback. They defend the run, but that's usually at the expense of giving up big plays in the secondary. That's a trade-off that they make every year. I know that they lost their 2 star linebackers, one to the portal, one to the NFL, but it's every year where they just replace key players, and boom, that front 7 is really tough to go against because they just bring the pressure. Secondary is going to be a question mark, but whatever Pat Narduzzi's team does against Louisville, usually it works to the extent to where it keeps it close. Keeps it close. And if Pittsburgh is not a good team, that's still a game where I'm not overlooking because of how the Panthers play the Cardinals perennially. So my 3 trap games, it's really like 1 and 2, and then you have large gap, and then number 3. And I went back and forth. Could North Carolina and Stanford both be trap games? Yeah, maybe from a competitive standpoint more so than Pittsburgh, but Syracuse and Wake Forest are my top 2 trap games by far, and then Pittsburgh is number 3. Let me know what your potential trap game candidates are in the comments below. That is going to wrap up this Tuesday edition of the show. I'm going out of town for the majority of this week. I will have my recording equipment with me, so we'll have a couple more shows as we get into game week. But also, if something notable happens, we'll talk about it right here at Locked On Louisville. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here coming up soon. Go Cards.